If I win against him, I'll become his wife. Billionaire challenges a janitor to defeat a giant. Hello everyone. How are you all doing today? I hope your day has been wonderful, filled with moments of peace and purpose. Whether you're working hard or taking time to rest, I wish you strength and joy in whatever you're doing. Now let's go to the story. The California sun painted the lobby of the Mel Brock Hotel in shades of amber and gold as Celeste Davenport stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the Pacific Ocean crash against the cliffs below. At 25, she had inherited an empire she never wanted, a chain of luxury hotels spanning 3 continents, investment portfolios that required teams of managers to oversee, and a loneliness so profound it felt like drowning in silk sheets every night in a mansion designed for a family she'd never have. Her royal blue blazer caught the light, perfectly tailored to her slender frame by a designer whose name she could barely pronounce, paired with denim shorts that would have scandalized the board members if they could see their CEO now. But they were 3,000 miles away in their New York offices, obsessing over quarterly reports and market shares. And here, in this moment, standing in her favorite property overlooking the ocean her father had loved, Celeste was just a woman trying to remember who she used to be before wealth and grief reshaped her into someone she barely recognized. The hotel lobby was quiet at this hour, 3 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, the lull between checkout and check-in when the staff moved through their duties with practiced efficiency. Celeste had taken to spending her afternoons here instead of in her office upstairs, watching the ebb and flow of people's lives, the way travelers arrived weary and left refreshed, the way families laughed together over ice cream in the beachside cafe, the way elderly couples held hands as they walked through the gardens Thomas Davenport had designed 30 years ago. Her father, always her father. 3 years of ownership and she still felt like a guest in his dream. "Excuse me, Ms. Davenport," a voice said behind her, rough-edged and respectful, the kind of voice that came from years of speaking carefully to people who held power over your livelihood. "The maintenance crew finished the 3rd-floor renovations. Just need your signature on the completion forms." She turned and for the first time in 3 years of owning this property, really looked at Ryan Walker. She'd seen him before, of course, signed his paychecks, nodded in passing when he held doors or fixed broken fixtures, but she'd never actually seen him. Not the way she did now, with afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows and nothing else demanding her attention. He was 29, she knew from his employee file, though he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone much older. Tall and lean, with the kind of hands that spoke of honest work, calloused but clean, nails trimmed short, movements deliberate and efficient as he held a clipboard with the same care most men reserved for expensive things. His blue maintenance uniform was spotless despite it being late afternoon, the fabric worn soft from countless washings but pressed with care. Yellow work gloves hung from his belt alongside a multi-tool and a small notebook that looked like it had seen better days. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Storm gray and intelligent, framed by laugh lines that suggested someone who found humor in the world, despite its hardships. The eyes of someone who read Marcus Aurelius between fixing broken pipes, who found philosophy in manual labor, who understood that dignity wasn't determined by your job title, but by how you treated the work you were given. "Thank you, Ryan," she said, taking the clipboard. Their fingers brushed and something electric passed between them. She'd noticed it before, dismissed it as loneliness, but today something felt different. "You've been here, what, 5 years? 6 next month," he replied, and she caught something in his voice. Pride without arrogance, the quiet dignity of a man who knew his worth despite what others might think. "Started the week after you bought the place." Celeste signed the forms, her hand pausing mid-signature. 6 years. Had it really been that long since Richard died? Since the car accident that made her a widow at 22 and an heiress at the same breath? The hotel had been his dream, his last gift to her, and she'd been running from it ever since. "You ride a motorcycle," she said suddenly, the observation surprising them both. "I've seen you in the parking lot. That blue Harley Davidson." Ryan's face transformed, a genuine smile breaking through his professional demeanor, like sunlight through storm clouds. 1973 Harley Davidson FLH. Restored every piece myself over the last 6 years. My dad taught me that a man who can fix his own bike can fix anything life throws at him. Said machines don't lie. You put in the work. They respond. Treat them with respect. They'll take care of you. Neglect them and they'll let you down when you need them most. Stoic philosophy, Celeste observed, tilting her head with genuine interest. This wasn't the polite small talk she usually exchanged with staff. This felt real, substantial. "Your father sounds like he was a wise man." "Was," Ryan corrected gently. and Celeste saw a flicker of old pain cross his features before he tucked it away with practiced ease. He passed when I was 17. Motorcycle accident, ironically enough. Drunk driver ran a red light. Left me that Harley and a library full of books. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Letters from a Stoic by Seneca. Thoreau's Walden. Even some Rumi poetry. Said the first would teach me how to move forward. The second would teach me why. And the poetry would remind me that the world was still beautiful, even when it broke your heart. He paused, looking out at the ocean as if gathering his thoughts from the waves. I work on her every weekend. There's something honest about machines. You put in the work, they respond. No pretense, no hidden agendas, no pretending to be something you're not. A carburetor doesn't care if you're wearing a suit or coveralls. It just wants to be understood and maintained properly. I find that refreshing. Celeste felt something crack in her chest, a fissure in the careful armor she'd built around herself since Richard's death. Here was a man who cleaned floors and quoted philosophers, who found meaning in motorcycle engines and wasn't ashamed of either, who saw beauty in honest work and wisdom in his father's practical lessons. In her world of quarterly reports and shareholder meetings, of people who measured worth in stock prices and social connections, such authenticity felt revolutionary. It felt dangerous. It felt like something she desperately needed. I'm hosting a charity event here next month, she heard herself say. The Pacific Coast Challenge motorcycle race along Highway 1 raises money for veterans programs. I don't suppose you'd be interested in participating? Ryan's expression shifted, something complex moving across his features. Interest, hesitation, and something else she couldn't identify. The Pacific Coast Challenge, he repeated slowly. That's the race where riders compete against the ghost of the giant. You know about it? Celeste felt her pulse quicken. Everyone in the motorcycle community knows about it. The giant, Thomas Davenport, set the course record 30 years ago, died in a racing accident 6 months later. Every year riders try to beat his time, but no one ever has. They say his ghost still owns that highway. Ryan studied her face. Thomas Davenport was your father, wasn't he? The lobby suddenly felt too small, too bright. Celeste nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. Her father, brilliant, reckless, loving Thomas Davenport, who taught her to love the ocean and motorcycles and the smell of engine grease before her mother took her away at 8 years old. Before the divorce, before the refinement lessons, before she became the perfect heiress instead of the wild-haired girl who used to ride on the back of his bike. He was, she whispered. I inherited the race along with everything else. Keep thinking maybe this year someone will finally beat his record, and I can stop living in his shadow. Ryan set down his clipboard, and in that moment the class difference between them vanished. They were just two people who understood loss. Records are meant to be broken, he said, but sometimes we hold on to them because they're the last piece we have of someone. Breaking your father's record wouldn't diminish him, Ms. Davenport. It would honor what he loved. The thrill of the challenge, the pursuit of something greater. How did you get so wise cleaning hotel floors? The question came out wrong, defensive, but Ryan didn't flinch. My father used to say that the work you do with your hands teaches you things the mind alone can't understand. Every floor I clean, I practice being present. Every pipe I fix, I learn that broken things can be made whole again. He picked up his clipboard. Will that be all, Ms. Davenport? She should have said yes. Should have let him go back to his work, back to the invisible role of the maintenance man. But something reckless, something that felt like the girl she used to be, made her step forward. What if I told you I'd make you an offer? The words tumbled out before she could stop them. What if I said that if you enter the Pacific Coast Challenge and beat my father's record, beat the giant, I'd marry you? The silence that followed was deafening. Celeste watched Ryan's face, saw shock, confusion, and then something that looked dangerously like hope flicker across his features before he shuddered it away. Ms. Davenport, call me Celeste, she interrupted. And I'm serious, you want to know why? Because in 6 years you're the first person who's talked to me like I'm human instead of a bank account. Because you quote Marcus Aurelius and restore motorcycles and have a philosophy about cleaning floors. Because I'm 25 years old and so tired of living a life that isn't mine. This is crazy, Ryan said, but he didn't walk away. Probably, Celeste agreed. But answer me this. When was the last time you did something that scared you? When was the last time you took a chance on something impossible? Ryan was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes searching hers. Then slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object on a leather cord. It was a medallion, old and worn, made from a seashell that had been polished smooth by countless years of handling. When I was 12, he said quietly, I met a girl on the beach. She was 8, and she was crying because her parents were fighting. I gave her this. Told her it was magic, that whenever she felt lost, she should hold it and remember that the ocean always finds its way home. He held it out to her. She promised she'd find me again someday and return it, but she never did. That was 17 years ago, and I've carried this with me ever since, waiting. Celeste's hand trembled as she reached for the medallion. The moment her fingers closed around it, the world tilted. She remembered, oh God, she remembered, a boy with kind eyes and a crooked smile, sitting on the beach at sunset, while her parents screamed at each other in the hotel behind them. She remembered him giving her a seashell and telling her stories about brave sailors and distant shores. She remembered promising to find him again. Ryan, she breathed. You were, the boy from the beach, he finished. I recognized you the day you bought this hotel, but you looked right through me. I figured you'd forgotten or didn't want to remember. So I stayed quiet, did my work, and told myself it was enough just to be near you again. The revelation hit Celeste like a physical blow. 6 years. He'd been here 6 years, watching her grieve Richard, watching her drift through her days like a ghost, and he'd never said a word. The patience, the quiet dignity of it, the sheer selflessness, it was more than she could process. Why didn't you say something? She asked, tears streaming down her face. Because you needed time to heal, Ryan said simply. Because I'm a maintenance worker and you're a billionaire, and I had no right to complicate your life with old memories. Because loving someone sometimes means staying silent and just being there when they need you. Loving? The word escaped as barely a whisper. Ryan's smile was sad and beautiful. I've been in love with you since I was 12 years old, Celeste. First with the memory of a little girl who needed kindness, then with the woman you became, strong and wounded and still fighting to find her way home. Celeste's mind reeled. The casual bet she'd made suddenly felt enormous, weighted with 17 years of history, and a connection she'd forgotten but never truly lost. The race, she said. Ryan, if you enter, I'll win, he said with quiet certainty. Not for the bet, not even for you, though God knows I want to. I'll win because that's what your father would have wanted. He set that record as a challenge, a dare to everyone who came after. Be better, push harder, never settle. If I'm going to ask for your hand, properly, the way you deserve, I need to prove I'm brave enough to reach for impossible things. This is insane, Celeste whispered, but she was smiling through her tears. Yeah, Ryan agreed, but you're the one who asked when I last did something that scared me. Turns out the answer is right now. The following weeks transformed the Melbrook Hotel into something resembling organized chaos. Word of Celeste's bet spread through the staff like wildfire. The billionaire CEO had wagered her hand in marriage to the maintenance man if he could beat the legendary ghost of the giant. Some found it romantic, others scandalous, but everyone had an opinion. Celeste threw herself into the race preparations with a fervor that surprised even herself. She'd been sleepwalking through life for so long that having a purpose, even one as unconventional as this, felt like oxygen after years of shallow breathing. She coordinated with sponsors, secured permits, and personally oversaw every detail of the event. But more than that, she began to remember who she'd been before grief and expectation reshaped her. Ryan, meanwhile, became a man possessed. His work schedule remained impeccable. He never missed a shift, never let his duties slide. But every free moment went to the Harley. He rebuilt the engine, fine-tuned the suspension, and spent hours on the practice runs along the coastal highway, learning every curve and camber of the road where Thomas Davenport had set his legendary record. Celeste found herself drawn to the garage behind the hotel where Ryan worked. She'd arrive with coffee and stay for hours, watching his hands move over the motorcycle with the same reverence a sculptor shows marble. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her about his father, about growing up working class in a world that often measured worth in dollar signs. She told him about Richard, about the guilt of inheriting wealth from a husband she'd married too young and lost too soon, about feeling like an imposter in her own life. You know what's funny? Celeste said one evening, sitting on an overturned crate while Ryan adjusted the carburetor. I spent years thinking I needed to prove I deserved my father's legacy. Turns out what I really needed was to remember why he loved what he loved. Ryan glanced up, grease smudged on his cheek. And what's that? The freedom of it. The wind, the speed, the absolute presence you have to maintain or you'll crash. He wasn't racing against other people. He was racing against his own limits, seeing how far he could push himself. She paused. I think I've been playing it safe for so long, I forgot what it felt like to truly live. Then maybe this race isn't about me beating your father's record, Ryan said thoughtfully. Maybe it's about both of us finding the courage to stop living in the past. When did you become a therapist? Celeste teased, but her heart ached with the truth of his words. Around the same time you became a motorcycle enthusiast. Ryan shot back with a grin. Come here, I want to show you something. Celeste stood and approached the Harley. Ryan guided her hand to the fuel tank where she felt something etched into the metal, barely perceptible unless you knew to look for it. Letters formed by countless hours of careful work. TD plus CD. Thomas Davenport and Celeste Davenport? She asked, her voice catching. I thought, Ryan said quietly, that if I'm going to ride in his memory, he should be with me. And you're the reason I'm doing this. Not because of the bet, but because you reminded me that some promises are worth keeping, even if they take 17 years. Celeste leaned into him, and Ryan's arms came around her, tentative at first, then solid and sure. They stood like that for a long time, two people who'd found each other twice against impossible odds, holding on to something that felt both fragile and unbreakable. Tell me about the giant, Ryan said eventually. Not the legend, the man. So Celeste told him. About Thomas Davenport, who'd made his fortune in real estate but lived for the weekends when he could race. About how he'd take her to the garage and let her hand him tools, teaching her the names of parts and the logic of engines. About the day her mother left him, citing his recklessness and refusal to act his age, taking 8-year-old Celeste across the country to Boston, where everything was proper and cold, and nothing smelled like motor oil and ocean salt. He wrote me letters, Celeste said, every week for 6 years until the accident. Told me about his races, about the hotel he was building on the California coast that would be mine someday. Promised that when I turned 18, I could choose where I wanted to live. But he died when I was 14, and my mother burned all his letters. Said I needed to move forward, not backward. But you kept the hotel, Ryan observed. Richard loved it here. Said it reminded him of his childhood summers in Malibu. We got married at 21, too young, too fast, and he convinced me to buy this place from my father's estate. Thought we'd run it together, start a family, build something meaningful. Her voice cracked. Then 6 months later, drunk driver and I'm a widow before I could figure out how to be a wife. Ryan's arms tightened around her. I'm sorry. The worst part is that I didn't love him. Not the way I should have. I cared about him, yes, but I married him to escape my mother's world, not because I couldn't live without him. And now he's dead, and I can't even grieve properly because I'm too guilty about not grieving enough. Celeste. Ryan turned her to face him, his gray eyes intense. You were 21. You did the best you could with what you knew. That's all any of us can do. Is it enough? She whispered. It has to be, Ryan said. Because the alternative is staying stuck in the past, and we both deserve better than that. They kissed then, slow and sweet, and tinged with salt from her tears and the ocean breeze that swept through the open garage. It felt like coming home and leaving home at the same time, like standing on the edge of a cliff and choosing to jump because the fall might just feel like flying. 3 weeks before the race, disaster struck. Ryan was working on the hotel's heating system when a pipe burst, sending scalding water across his left arm. The burn was serious enough to require hospitalization, and the doctor's prognosis was grim. He could ride, but the pain would be intense, and his grip strength compromised. Celeste sat in the hospital room watching Ryan sleep and felt the familiar weight of loss pressing down on her chest. This was her fault. Her reckless bet, her impulsive challenge. She'd put him in a position where he felt he had to risk everything. Hey, Ryan's voice was rough from the pain medication. I can hear you thinking from here. This was stupid, Celeste said. I'm calling off the bet. You don't have to race. Like hell I don't. Ryan struggled to sit up, wincing. Celeste, I've been preparing for this my whole life. Not the race, the chance to be worthy of you. To prove that a maintenance worker can stand beside a billionaire as an equal. You already are my equal, Celeste protested. Ryan, you have more integrity in your injured hand than most people have in their entire being. Then let me do this, Ryan said. Not to prove it to you, but to prove it to myself. I've spent years being invisible, playing it safe. You gave me permission to be brave. Don't take that away now. Celeste wanted to argue, wanted to protect him from pain and risk and possible failure. But she saw in his eyes the same wild hunger she'd been feeling, the need to test yourself against the impossible, to choose the uncertain adventure over the safe harbor. Okay, she said finally, but I'm there every step of the way. No more watching from the sidelines. Deal, Ryan agreed, then added with a tired smile. Besides, I've got 3 weeks to heal and I'm stubborn as hell. They spent those weeks together. Celeste took a leave of absence from her corporate duties, much to her board's horror, and devoted herself to Ryan's recovery and training. She learned about motorcycle mechanics, studied the physics of racing with the same intensity she'd once brought to MBA coursework, and practiced the meditation techniques Ryan used to manage both physical pain and mental pressure. The board of directors called emergency meetings. Her mother phoned from Boston, her voice sharp with disapproval. "Celeste Marie Davenport, have you lost your mind? This maintenance worker, this race, it's beneath you. Richard would be ashamed. Richard would understand," Celeste said calmly, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "He married me knowing I was running from something. Ryan is teaching me to run toward something instead." She hung up before her mother could respond, and it felt like freedom. They rode together when Ryan was strong enough, her arms wrapped around his waist as the Harley roared along the Pacific Coast Highway. Celeste learned to read the road the way Ryan did, to see where the asphalt darkened from oil, where the shoulder crumbled, where the wind patterns could push you wide on a curve. She learned that racing wasn't just about speed. It was about reading 1,000 variables simultaneously and making split-second decisions that could mean the difference between victory and disaster. "Feel that?" Ryan would shout over the engine noise, leaning into a particularly sharp curve. "That's your body and the bike becoming one thing. You stop thinking and start responding. It's like meditation at 80 miles an hour." Celeste began to understand why her father had loved this. The absolute presence it demanded. The way everything else, board meetings, inheritance disputes, social expectations, melted away when you were leaned into a curve at speed. There was just you, the machine, and the road. Pure, honest, real. During one of these rides, they stopped at the beach where they'd first met 17 years ago. It looked different now, more developed. A parking lot where there used to be wild grass, a coffee shop where there had once been nothing but dunes. But the ocean remained constant, eternal, indifferent to human changes. "I was terrified that day," Celeste admitted, walking barefoot in the sand. "My parents had just told me we were moving to Boston. I felt like my whole world was ending. And I was just a kid who wanted to help," Ryan said. "Thought I was being brave, giving you that medallion. Truth is, I gave you the only thing I had that mattered to me. My dad had given it to me the day before he died, told me it would bring me luck." Celeste stopped walking. "Ryan, I didn't know. I wanted you to have it more than I wanted luck," he said simply. "Even at 12, I understood that some people need help more than others, and true courage is giving away what you can't afford to lose." They stood there as the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed almost supernatural. Celeste reached into her pocket and pulled out the seashell medallion. She'd been carrying it every day since Ryan had shown it to her. "I think," she said slowly, "that you should have this back. For the race. It brought me home to you. Maybe it'll bring you home to me." Ryan took it, his fingers trembling slightly. Then he did something unexpected. He broke the medallion in half along a natural fault line in the shell. He handed one half back to Celeste and kept the other. "Now we each have half," he said. "A reminder that we're not complete without each other, but we're not broken either. Just waiting to be whole." Celeste kissed him as the last light faded from the sky, and for the first time since Richard died, she felt truly alive. "Hello, my friend. How was your day today? Is everything okay?" The question echoed in Celeste's mind as she stood in her mansion the night before the race, pacing the marble floors of a house that had never felt like home. Ryan had asked her that earlier, his concern genuine despite his own nervousness about tomorrow, and she'd realized that in all her years of wealth and status, no one had asked her that question with such simple sincerity. The doorbell rang, surprising her. It was past midnight. When she opened the door, Ryan stood there in jeans and a worn leather jacket, the Harley idling in her driveway. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Figured you couldn't either," Ryan said. "Want to go for a ride?" They rode through the empty California streets past sleeping suburbs and darkened shops until they reached the starting point of tomorrow's race. Ryan cut the engine, and they sat there in the silence, looking at the ribbon of highway that stretched before them like a challenge written in asphalt. "I need to tell you something," Ryan said. "About the Harley." Celeste waited, sensing this was important. "When I said I restored every piece myself, that was true. But what I didn't tell you was where I got it. After my father died, his Harley was sold to settle debts. I spent 11 years tracking it down, working odd jobs, saving every penny. When I finally found it, it was in a junkyard in Nevada. Rusted, broken, barely recognizable." He paused, his hand gentle on the handlebars. "The man who owned the junkyard told me it had come from an estate sale. A racer who died in an accident 30 years ago. When I saw the initials etched into the frame, TD, I didn't think much of it. Lots of people have those initials." Celeste's heart stopped. Ryan, are you saying this Harley belonged to your father? Ryan confirmed quietly. I've been riding Thomas Davenport's motorcycle for 6 years, restoring it piece by piece, never knowing the connection. Not until I started researching his record and saw the old photos. Same model, same year, same custom modifications. It's his, Celeste. The bike he would have been riding the day he died if he hadn't already sold it to pay for your mother's settlement. The revelation was staggering. Celeste reached out and touched the fuel tank with shaking hands, feeling the metal that her father had touched, the machine he'd loved enough to sacrifice. This is impossible, she whispered. I thought about not telling you, Ryan admitted. Thought it might be too much, too strange. But then I realized, what are the odds? Of all the junkyards in America, of all the bikes I could have found, I found his. The boy who comforted his daughter found the machine that was supposed to be his legacy. That's not coincidence. That's fate. Or love, Celeste said, tears streaming down her face. My father loved this bike, and he loved me enough to give it up so I could have a better life. And you loved it back to life, not knowing you were honoring a man who meant everything to me. They held each other in the darkness. Two people bound by threads of connection so intricate they seemed designed by something greater than chance. Tomorrow, Ryan would ride Thomas Davenport's Harley against Thomas Davenport's record, trying to beat a ghost who was also the reason they'd found each other at all. No pressure, Celeste said with a watery laugh. None at all, Ryan agreed. But he was smiling. They rode back to Celeste's mansion as dawn began to paint the eastern sky. At her door, Ryan cupped her face in his hands, his left still bandaged but stronger now. Win or lose tomorrow, he said. I want you to know something. You didn't need to make that bet. I would have loved you anyway, bet or no bet, race or no race. I've been loving you for 17 years and I'll keep loving you for 17 more and 17 after that. Ryan Walker, Celeste said, her voice steady despite her tears. If you don't kiss me right now, I'm going to combust from the sheer romantic tension. He laughed, a beautiful open sound, and kissed her as the sun rose over California, painting them both in shades of gold. Race day arrived with unseasonable clarity. Not a cloud in the sky, the Pacific glittering like scattered diamonds, and a crowd that stretched for miles along the coastal highway. 40 riders had entered the Pacific Coast Challenge, but everyone knew there were really only two competitors, Ryan Walker and the Ghost of the Giant. The morning had broken cool and crisp, perfect racing weather. Celeste had barely slept, spending the hours before dawn watching Ryan through the window as he worked on the Harley one final time. She'd seen him touch the fuel tank where her father's initials were etched, seen his lips move in what might have been prayer, or might have been conversation with a man 30 years dead. The intimacy of it, the quiet communion between the living and the dead, had brought tears to her eyes. Now she stood at the starting line in her royal blue blazer and denim shorts, her blonde hair caught back in a practical ponytail, looking every inch the CEO and nothing like the frightened girl who'd once cried on a beach because her world was falling apart. She'd addressed the crowd earlier, her voice steady as she explained the charity's purpose. Supporting veterans who'd come home broken and were learning to rebuild themselves, much like Ryan had rebuilt the Harley, much like she was rebuilding herself. The metaphor wasn't lost on anyone. The other riders gave Ryan space, partly respect for someone attempting the impossible, partly superstition around challenging a legend, partly the uncomfortable awareness that this race had become something more than a competition. The story of the maintenance man racing on the giant's own Harley to win the giant's daughter's hand had taken on mythic proportions in the motorcycle community. Some called it romantic, others called it hubris. A few whispered it was cursed. Ryan called it Tuesday and kept his focus on the bike. The press was everywhere, cameras and microphones transforming the starting area into a media circus. A reporter from the Los Angeles Times had tried to interview Celeste earlier. Ms. Davenport, some people are saying this bet is a publicity stunt. How do you respond to critics who claim you're trivializing your father's legacy? She'd looked the woman dead in the eye. My father set that record as a challenge to everyone who came after him. He believed in pushing limits, in testing yourself against the impossible. If anything trivializes his legacy, it's people who think a maintenance worker isn't worthy of trying. Ryan Walker has more courage in his injured hand than most people demonstrate in their entire lives. The reporter had backed off after that. You ready for this? Celeste asked, approaching him. Ryan looked up from checking the tire pressure, his gray eyes calm. Marcus Aurelius said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. I can't control whether I win. I can only control how I ride. Very philosophical, Celeste said, but you didn't answer my question. Ryan straightened, setting aside his tools. He pulled out his half of the seashell medallion and held it up to catch the light. I'm ready to try. That's all any of us can do. Try our best and trust that the outcome will be what it's supposed to be. And if you lose, then I lose, Ryan said simply. But I'll have raced with everything I have, on your father's bike, carrying your memory. That's already more victory than I ever expected to have. Celeste kissed him then in front of 40 riders and 10,000 spectators, and she didn't care who saw or what they thought. When they pulled apart, she pressed something into his hand, her half of the medallion. Take both, she said. Ride with us both, me and my father, bring them home together. The starting gun fired, and chaos erupted. 40 motorcycles roared to life, a thunder of engines that seemed to shake the very earth. Ryan had drawn position 15, middle of the pack, neither advantaged nor disadvantaged. As they rocketed forward, Celeste watched him disappear into the mass of riders, a blue blur on a blue bike, chasing a ghost that might never be caught. The racecourse was 60 miles of the most treacherous highway in California, sharp curves that could snap your concentration in an instant, steep drops where one mistake meant a fatal plunge, sections where the road seemed to cling to the cliff face by will alone. Spectators lined the route at the safer viewing points, but there were long stretches where the riders were alone with the road, the ocean, and their own courage or foolishness. Celeste followed in a chase car with the race organizers and medical team, radio updates crackling through every few minutes like heartbeats on a monitor. She gripped the armrest so hard her knuckles turned white, each transmission either easing her panic or spiking it higher. Mile 2, Walker's in 15th position, riding clean, maintaining pace. Ryan had drawn position 15, middle of the pack, neither advantaged nor disadvantaged. In racing, starting position mattered less than your ability to read opportunities and your willingness to take calculated risks. Celeste had learned that from studying her father's old racing journals, which she'd found in a storage unit last week and read cover to cover in one sleepless night. Mile 5, Walker moves to 10th, passing on the inside at Serpent's Run. Aggressive but controlled, her heart lurched. Serpent's Run was 3 consecutive S-curves with no margin for error. Passing there required either insane skill or insane recklessness, and she wasn't sure which terrified her more. Mile 8, Walker in 8th position. His time is currently tracking even with Thomas Davenport's pace at this same point. Even. Not ahead, not behind. Ryan was pacing the ghost, riding alongside history. The radio announcer's voice carried a note of disbelief, and Celeste understood why. Most riders who challenged the Giants' record flamed out early, pushing too hard in the opening miles and losing control. Ryan was being patient, strategic, conserving his strength for where it mattered most. Mile 12, Walker moves to 5th. Clean pass on Rodriguez at Miller's Point. Jennifer Rodriguez, Lightning Rodriguez, was one of the best riders on the West Coast. If Ryan was passing her, he wasn't just racing well, he was racing brilliantly. At mile 20, the radio transmission came with a new edge of excitement. Ladies and gentlemen, Ryan Walker is riding like a man possessed. His time is currently tracking 3 seconds ahead of Thomas Davenport's pace at this same point in the race. 3 seconds. Celeste's heart hammered against her ribs. 3 seconds didn't sound like much to someone who didn't understand racing, but in this context it was an eternity. It also meant Ryan was pushing hard, maybe too hard. His injured arm had to be screaming by now. The vibration of the engine at high-speed torture against burned tissue and healing muscle. The pain medication they'd given him would help, but it also dulled reflexes slightly, a trade-off that made every decision more critical. At mile 30, the race's halfway point, disaster struck. The radio went silent for a long, terrible moment that seemed to stretch into infinity. Celeste's breath caught in her throat. In that silence, she heard every horrible possibility. Ryan had crashed, Ryan was injured, Ryan was dead. The radio operator beside her had gone pale, his hand frozen on the dial. Then the radio crackled back to life. We have a rider down at Devil's Curve. Repeat, rider down at Devil's Curve. Medical team en route. Ambulance dispatched. Celeste couldn't breathe. Devil's Curve. The name alone sent ice through her veins. It was the most notorious section of the course. A hairpin turn that dropped away to nothing on the ocean side, where the guardrail was more psychological comfort than actual protection. It was where her father had often said he'd flirted with death and come away laughing, where he'd learned the difference between courage and stupidity by dancing along that line until he understood it in his bones. It was also where, 6 months after setting his record, Thomas Davenport had lost control during a different race and plunged to his death. The official report said mechanical failure. Those who knew him said he'd been pushing too hard, trying to recapture the magic of that perfect run, unable to accept that maybe some moments were meant to be singular. "Who?" Celeste demanded, grabbing the radio operator's arm hard enough to bruise. Her voice didn't sound like her own. It was raw, desperate, the voice of someone watching their worst nightmares materialize. "Who went down?" The operator consulted his sheet with maddening slowness, his finger running down a list of numbers and names. "Number 27, he said finally, and Celeste heard both relief and guilt in his own voice. "Marcus Chen. Not your guy. Walker's still in the race. He passed Chen just before the curve. Clean. Professional." Chen went wide trying to keep pace and lost it. Relief flooded through her with such intensity that her knees nearly buckled, immediately followed by guilt so sharp it felt like a knife between her ribs. Someone's guy had gone down. Someone's son or brother or father was being loaded into an ambulance right now, possibly fighting for his life. Marcus Chen had a wife and 2 teenagers she remembered from the pre-race briefing. They were probably in the crowd somewhere, their celebratory signs abandoned, their hearts broken by a split-second miscalculation on a curve that had claimed too many lives already. The race suddenly felt less like romance and more like Russian roulette. What was she doing, encouraging this? What had she been thinking, making a bet that put someone's life at risk? Her father had died doing this. What if Ryan? No, she couldn't think like that. Couldn't let fear paralyze her now. But the riders kept racing. That was the thing about people who chose this life. They understood the risks and rode anyway because some things mattered more than safety. Like proving you could face your fears. Like honoring the memory of a man who'd lived more fully in 40 years than most people did in 80. At mile 45 with 15 miles to go, Ryan was in 3rd place. The leader was a professional racer named Marcus Chen, a man who'd placed in the top 5 for the last 8 years. 2nd place was Jennifer Lightning Rodriguez, a legend in her own right. And in 3rd, gaining ground with every mile, was a hotel maintenance worker riding a dead man's motorcycle and carrying his daughter's heart. I need to pause here and share something with all of you listening to this story. Merry Christmas to each and every one of you. May God protect you and your families during this beautiful season and always. This is a wish from the heart of your channel creator, that you find joy, peace, and love in your lives just as our characters are finding in theirs. Now, let's return to Ryan and Celeste's story. The radio updates came faster now, building tension with each crackling transmission. Mile 47. Ryan moved into 2nd place. Mile 50. He was pushing Rodriguez hard, the 2 bikes so close they looked like a single machine with 4 wheels. Mile 53. Rodriguez's engine blew, forcing her to pull over, and suddenly Ryan was in the lead with 7 miles to go. Celeste watched through the chase car's windshield as the finish line came into view. A massive crowd had gathered, their roar audible even over the sound of engines. The timer on the dashboard counted down Thomas Davenport's record time, 39 minutes, 42 seconds. Ryan's current time, 39 minutes, 15 seconds. He had 27 seconds to cover the final 7 miles if he wanted to beat the record. It was possible barely, but it would require riding at the absolute edge of control, risking everything in those final moments. "Come on," Celeste whispered, her hands clenched into fists. "Come on, Ryan." The blue Harley appeared on the horizon, a speck that grew larger with impossible speed. Ryan was leaned into the bike at an angle that looked physically impossible, his body and the machine moving as one entity. Celeste could see the determination in every line of his posture, the focus that came from years of patient work and quiet dignity channeled into one explosive moment. Mile 57, 39 minutes, 30 seconds. 12 seconds under pace, 3 miles to go. Mile 58, 39 minutes, 35 seconds. 7 seconds under, 2 miles remaining. Mile 59, 39 minutes, 39 seconds. 3 seconds under, 1 mile to the finish. The crowd was screaming now, a wall of sound that seemed to physically push the riders forward. Ryan and Marcus Chen were neck and neck, 2 bikes thundering toward destiny, but Chen was trying to beat a competitor while Ryan was trying to beat a ghost. The final mile stretched before them. Straight road, no curves, just pure speed and will. Ryan shifted his weight and the Harley responded like a living thing. Celeste saw him do something strange. He reached down and touched the fuel tank where her father's initials were etched. A gesture so quick she almost missed it. Permission? Blessing? Connection to something beyond the physical? 500 yards to go. 40 seconds. 300 yards. 30 seconds. 100 yards. 25 seconds. Ryan crossed the finish line in a blur of blue and chrome, and for a long suspended moment no one knew if he'd done it. The crowd fell silent, waiting for the official time. Celeste leaped from the chase car, running toward the finish line where Ryan was bringing the Harley to a stop, his hands shaking on the handlebars. The announcer's voice boomed across the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a new record. Ryan Walker has completed the Pacific Coast Challenge in 39 minutes and 39 seconds, 3 seconds faster than Thomas Davenport's legendary time." The crowd erupted. Ryan pulled off his helmet, his face streaked with tears and sweat and something that looked like transcendence. Celeste reached him, and he practically fell off the bike into her arms, his injured hand finally giving out from the strain. "I did it," he said, his voice hoarse. "Celeste, I did it." "You did it," she confirmed, laughing and crying at the same time. "You beautiful, impossible, brave man. You actually did it." But Ryan shook his head, pulling back to look at her. "No," he said. "We did it. You, me, and your father. I felt him there, Celeste. On that last mile, I swear I felt him with me. Like he was riding too, showing me the line, telling me where to push and where to trust the bike. We did this together." Celeste looked at the blue Harley sitting there with its engine ticking as it cooled, and she believed him. Some things couldn't be explained by physics or probability. Some things just were. Like a boy finding a girl twice in one lifetime. Like a dead man's motorcycle finding its way back to his daughter. Like love that survived 17 years and one reckless bet. "So," Ryan said, his gray eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "About that marriage proposal. I believe I said if you beat the giant, I'd marry you," Celeste confirmed. "And I believe I just beat the giant," Ryan said with a smile that was pure joy and mischief combined. Celeste pulled him close, their foreheads touching, the crowd's celebration fading into background noise. "Then I guess you'd better ask me properly, Ryan Walker." Ryan, maintenance worker, philosopher, motorcycle mechanic, and the man who'd waited 17 years, dropped to one knee right there at the finish line, in front of 10,000 witnesses. He pulled out both halves of the seashell medallion and fitted them together, holding them up to catch the California sun. "Celeste Davenport," he said, his voice carrying across the sudden hush. "When we were children, I gave you this and told you it would help you find your way home. I didn't know then that home wasn't a place. It was a person. It was you. Will you marry me?" Celeste looked at this man, this impossible, wonderful man who cleaned floors and quoted Stoic philosophers, who'd restored her father's motorcycle piece by piece without knowing what it would mean, who'd raced against a ghost and won not through arrogance but through love. And she knew her answer had been written 17 years ago on a beach where a scared little girl met a brave little boy. "Yes," she said. "Yes, yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." They kissed as the crowd roared approval, as cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, as the sun hung perfect and golden over the Pacific. And somewhere, Celeste could have sworn, she heard the rumble of a motorcycle engine that sounded like her father's laughter blessing them both. The bet had been won, the giant had been beaten, but more importantly, two people who'd been lost had finally found their way home to each other, and that, as Ryan would have said, was exactly as it was supposed to be. But the riders kept racing. That was the thing about people who chose this life. They understood the risks and rode anyway because some things mattered more than safety, like proving you could face your fears, like honoring the memory of a man who'd lived fully, like showing someone you loved that you were brave enough to reach for impossible things. At mile 45, with 15 miles to go, Ryan was in third place. The new leader was Jennifer "Lightning" Rodriguez, a professional racing legend who'd conquered tracks across 3 continents. Second place was Tommy Briggs, a young hotshot with everything to prove, and in third, gaining ground with every mile, was a hotel maintenance worker riding a dead man's motorcycle, carrying the hopes of everyone who'd ever been told they weren't good enough. The radio updates came faster now, building tension with each transmission, the announcer's voice rising with excitement. Mile 47. Walker moves into second place. Briggs went wide, lost momentum. Walker's riding the perfect line. Mile 50. Walker is pushing Rodriguez hard. His time is still 3 seconds ahead of the giant's pace. This is extraordinary. Mile 53, Rodriguez's engine blew. She's pulling over safely. Ryan Walker is in the lead with 7 miles to go. Can he hold it? Celeste watched through the chase car's windshield as the finish line appeared. The timer counted down. 39 minutes, 42 seconds. Ryan's time, 39 minutes, 15 seconds. 27 seconds to cover 7 miles. Possible. Barely. "Come on," Celeste whispered. "Come on, Ryan." The blue Harley appeared on the horizon, growing larger with impossible speed. Ryan was leaned into the bike at an angle that defied physics, his body and machine perfectly synchronized. Mile 57, 39 minutes, 30 seconds, 12 seconds under pace. Mile 58, 39 minutes, 35 seconds, 7 seconds under. Mile 59, 39 minutes, 39 seconds, 3 seconds under. 1 mile to finish. The crowd screamed, a wall of sound pushing him forward. Ryan shifted his weight, and the Harley responded like it remembered what it meant to fly. He reached down and touched the fuel tank where her father's initials were etched. 500 yards, 40 seconds. 300 yards, 30 seconds. 100 yards, 25 seconds. Ryan crossed the finish line in a blur of blue and chrome. The crowd fell silent, waiting. Celeste leaped from the chase car before it had fully stopped, running toward the finish line where Ryan was bringing the Harley to a controlled stop, his hands shaking on the handlebars, his entire body trembling from the adrenaline and effort and pain. The announcer's voice boomed, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a new record. Ryan Walker, 39 minutes and 39 seconds. The giant has been defeated." The crowd erupted. Ryan pulled off his helmet, his face streaked with tears and sweat. Celeste reached him, and he fell into her arms. "I did it," he said, voice hoarse. "Celeste, I actually did it." "You did it," she confirmed, laughing and crying. "You beautiful, impossible, brave man." Ryan shook his head. "No, we did it. You, me, and your father. I felt him there, Celeste. On that last mile like he was riding too, showing me the line. We did this together." Celeste looked at the blue Harley, 30 years of history contained in metal and chrome. She believed him. Some things couldn't be explained. Like a boy finding a girl twice, like a dead man's motorcycle finding its way back, like love surviving 17 years. "So," Ryan said, eyes intense, "about that marriage proposal. I believe I said if you beat the giant I'd marry you," Celeste confirmed. "And I believe I just beat the giant," Ryan said with a smile of pure joy. Celeste pulled him close. "Then you'd better ask me properly, Ryan Walker." Ryan dropped to one knee at the finish line, before 10,000 witnesses. He pulled out both halves of the seashell medallion, fitting them together, holding them up to the sun. "Celeste Davenport," he said, voice carrying across the hush. "When we were children, I gave you this and told you it would help you find your way home. I didn't know then that home was a person. It was you. Will you marry me? Not because of a bet, but because I love you and want to spend my life proving it every day." Celeste looked at this man who'd restored her father's motorcycle without knowing what it would mean, who'd raced against a ghost and won through love and courage, and she knew her answer had been written 17 years ago on a beach. "Yes," she said, voice clear and strong. "Yes, yes, yes. 1,000 times yes." They kissed as the crowd roared, as cameras flashed, as the sun hung golden over the Pacific, and somewhere Celeste heard the rumble of a motorcycle engine that sounded like her father's laughter, blessing them both. The bet had been won. The giant had been beaten. The record had fallen. But more importantly, two people who'd been lost had finally found their way home to each other. Two halves of a broken shell had become whole again, and a love that had waited 17 years had finally been given permission to flourish. 6 months later, they married on that same beach where they'd first met all those years ago. It was a small ceremony, intimate and perfect, with just close friends and hotel staff who'd watched their love story unfold. Celeste wore her royal blue blazer over a simple white dress, her father's favorite color combined with tradition. Ryan wore a suit with yellow flowers in his lapel that matched the maintenance gloves he'd worn the day she really saw him for the first time. A playful reminder that love doesn't care about job titles or social class. The Harley stood nearby, decorated with white ribbons and wildflowers, a silent witness to a love story that had been written in engine grease and seashells, and the courage to bet everything on impossible things. Thomas Davenport's initials gleamed on the fuel tank, catching the afternoon sun, as if he too was in attendance, giving his blessing to the man who'd beaten his record and won his daughter's heart. They rode away from the ceremony as husband and wife, the engine's roar mixing with the ocean's eternal song and the cheers of their guests. Celeste wrapped her arms around Ryan's waist, her head resting against his back, feeling the steady beat of his heart through his jacket. The coastal highway stretched before them, the same road where Ryan had proved his courage, where her father had set his legendary record, where countless riders had tested themselves against the impossible. But today, they weren't racing anyone. They were just riding. Two people who'd learned that sometimes the greatest victories aren't about beating records or proving worth to a world that measures everything in the wrong currency. Sometimes victory is simply finding someone who sees you, truly sees you, and choosing to build a life together based on honesty, dignity, and the radical belief that love matters more than status. that character matters more than credentials, and that home isn't found in mansions or hotels or bank accounts. Home is wherever you find someone brave enough to wait 17 years for a promise, strong enough to race against ghosts to keep it, and wise enough to know that the real prize was never the race itself. It was finding each other again and choosing, every single day, to be worthy of that second chance. Ryan pulled the Harley over at a scenic overlook, the same spot where Thomas Davenport used to stop during his practice runs. They stood together at the cliff's edge, watching the sun begin its descent toward the Pacific horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose and gold. "What are you thinking about?" Celeste asked, tucking herself against Ryan's side. "Your father," Ryan admitted, wondering if he knew somehow that his bike would find its way back to you, that a 12-year-old boy would keep a promise for 17 years, that everything would work out exactly as it was supposed to. Celeste smiled, reaching into her pocket and pulling out her half of the seashell medallion. Ryan did the same, and they fitted the pieces together, whole again, just like them. "I think he knew," Celeste said softly. "I think he set that record not just as a challenge, but as a map, a way for someone brave enough and patient enough to find their way to me. And you did." They stood there as the sun kissed the horizon, as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, as the ocean whispered its ancient songs below them. Two people who'd started as strangers, became childhood friends, lived 17 years apart, and found their way back to each other through a blue Harley-Davidson and the courage to bet on love. And that, as Ryan would say, quoting Marcus Aurelius one final time, is exactly as it's supposed to be.